Hey guys, Trap God Senpai back with another video. This time we're going to be doing a recap of the first two seasons of Mob Psycho. I know it's been a couple of years since the last season, so I'm going to give you guys the rundown on what happened in the first two, so you don't miss out on anything in season 3. Without any further ado, let's get started. In the beginning of season 1, we're introduced to our main character, Shigeo Kageyama, or as we know him throughout the series, Mob. Mob is a young middle schooler with insane psychic abilities. He works for a fake psychic named Arataka Reagan, and we're first introduced to their dynamic in episode 1, where Reagan tries to exorcise a ghost, it doesn't work, he calls in Mob, and Mob deals with it easily. Like always, Reagan manages to convince the ever-gullible Mob that the reason he didn't defeat it was because it was too weak. Later we are introduced to Mob's love interest, Tsubomi Takane, at his middle school, and we get one more fight with the ghosts of Honaido Tunnel, in which again, Mob does the work, and Reagan states they were too weak for him to act. The next thing we see is Reagan swindling a customer, and Mob begins to wonder if it's truly okay to do that to people. School drama ensues with the Telepathy Club attempting to recruit Mob to meet the minimum student threshold. Reagan finds out and gets in an argument with his classmates, and tells Mob not to join. Later, Mob and Reagan go to a girls' school to exorcise a spirit. At the front gate, Reagan is stopped and mistaken for a pervert while Mob slips in. Mob then corners the spirit easily and defeats them, but the spirit talked to Mob, asking if he is living life to the fullest. Thinking on that question, the next day he decides to join the Telepathy Club, but at the last second decides to join the Body Improvement Club instead so he can be more desirable for his crush Tsubomi. We then see Mob exercising with his new club, and come to learn the Telepathy Club was allowed to stay in their club room because the Body Improvement Club only uses it for storage. Later at Reagan's office they have a heart-to-heart about popularity and wanting to be liked, and when he leaves, Mob is tricked by a woman claiming to make him popular. She brings him to a cult being run by a spirit, Dimple, who is mind-controlling people using laughter as an emotional gateway. He tries it on Mob, it doesn't work, then challenges him to a milk-drinking competition. If you laugh, you lose. He puts something in Mob's drink, then when he spits it out, claims that Mob lost. This angers Mob, who then cancels all of Dimple's magic. Dimple then berates him, saying he has a terrible life because he has no emotions. This causes Mob's stored emotions to reach 100%, releasing his rage, and he takes out Dimple easily. Later, Reagan tells Mob that he's unique, and it was because of that he was able to help those people, making Mob feel better. The next day, Mob wakes up with a weakened Dimple in his room. Dimple explains to Mob that he wants to work for him and won't do anything bad anymore, so Mob spares his life and brings him to Reagan. Dimple sees Reagan as a fake, but doesn't tell Mob, and Reagan can't see Dimple, so he tells Mob that he must be really weak to keep his cover. We then go to the school delinquent Tenga. Him and his men have beef with the Black Vinegar Middle School and ask the Body Improvement Club to help them fight. When they refuse, Tenga decides to set Mob up to be captured by his enemies, forcing the Body Improvement Club into action. It works, and they defeat the Black Vinegar School members. Then a fellow Esper from the Black Vinegar Middle School appears, and defeats all of Mob's friends with ease. Mob unties himself from the Esper Taruki's power and tells him that he shouldn't use his power to fight. Taruki attacks Mob, but it has no effect, and Mob states that he isn't going to fight back because Reagan told him Espers shouldn't use their powers to hurt others. Dimple asks Taruki to stop attacking Mob because he isn't fighting back. Taruki refuses and easily defeats Dimple. Taruki and Mob get into an argument, Mob stating Taruki is a bad person and even Dimple is better than him. This leads Taruki to be enraged and fight Mob with all of his power. Mob, still refusing to fight back, eventually passes out, where his emotions reach %, and reanimate his passed out body, easily destroying Taruki's barrier, making the rubble of the entire school levitate and go above the clouds with Taruki. Before anything worse can happen, Mob awakens and sees the destruction he's caused. This leads his sadness to reach 100%, and he uses his power to reconstruct the entire school building from rubble. Mob later looks around for Dimple, but can't find him and returns home. The next time we see Mob, he's accompanying Reagan to a seance, but things go south when the client requests information Reagan can't guess. He pulls a knife on Reagan, and Reagan knocks him out in self-defense, leading Mob to question if he can use psychic powers in self-defense as well. Mob is later confronted at school about his fight with Taruki, but refuses to talk about it. Later, Mob's brother Ritsu is mistaken for him and invited to go to an awakening lab to amplify his psychic powers, and on arrival comments how weak the other psychics are. When he gets back to school, Ritsu plans to get revenge for his brother. Him, along with Shinji Kamuro, form a plan to get Tenga in trouble and hopefully stop his delinquent ways. Once they plant evidence and get the school to label him as a pervert, Ritsu regrets his actions and goes home. Based on his experience at the psychic lab, he thinks that he has no psychic powers. But we see a bent spoon he was holding shortly before, proving to us that he possesses some psychic abilities. It's further proven upon arriving at home he can now see Dimple, using his new psychic abilities. But he can't help but wonder what that creature could be. Rumors of someone named White Tea Poison defeating Taruki begin to spread. At the same time, Dimple convinces Ritsu to let him help increase his power with the plot of taking over his body. Ritsu falls for it, but luckily, once Dimple enters his body, he realizes he's too weak to fully control it. Ritsu, using Dimple's help, beats up the people he framed when they come to him looking for trouble. After that, Taruki shows up. Dimple tells Ritsu to run, but he wants to test his new powers, and quickly learns he is no match for Taruki and escapes. For the next few days, gang members confront Ritsu, wondering if he's White Tea Poison, and he effortlessly defeats all of them. After his latest fight, Mob appears and witnesses his brother being violent, asking him what he's doing. Ritsu attacks Mob, saying he was only nice to him because he was afraid of him, but he isn't anymore. And upon seeing his powers, Mob congratulates him on his ability, and then apologizes to the people he beat up. Megumu Koyama goes after Ritsu, who they believe to be Mob because of his file at the Awakening Lab. He easily defeats him, but as he's trying to leave with Ritsu, Mob fights him. Megumu beats Mob up, and when Ritsu tries to help, he beats him up as well, leading Mob's animosity to reach 100%. He starts destroying Megumu with ease. Realizing there's no other way, Megumu uses his trump card, with Mob shrugging it off with zero difficulty. Everyone realizing Mob is White Tea Poison start cheering him on. Eventually, Megumu uses trickery to escape with Ritsu, and Mob passes out. When he wakes up, he is at Taruki's place, and he tells him about Claw, a dangerous organization run by espers, and telling him they took his brother to brainwash him and add him to their ranks. We then see Megumu lead Ritsu and the other espers to a secret facility. The secret facility is Claw's 7th Division building. Megumu's associate Yusuke is surprised that Ritsu managed to hurt him. That's when he reveals it was a different, much stronger esper. Megumu then explains that he was strong, but he only lost because he underestimated him, and they have little to fear if they prepare adequately. Going back to the other brother, Taruki offers his help to Mob, explaining that Claw members will come for them. Perfect timing. Terada, another associate of Claw, appears. Underestimating them, he is dispatched quickly. Taruki tortures him and he gives up all the information he knows. Now arriving at the 7th facility by the guide of Terada, Mob fights him again and defeats him. This leads to a commotion, letting the upper echelon leaders notice there are intruders, and they send Megumu out to take on Mob again, but kill him this time. When Megumu arrives, Mob says he doesn't have time to play around, and smashes him against the walls repeatedly until he's knocked out. The quick loss lets the leaders know they're up against someone strong. Ritsu and his new comrades that were also kidnapped are making progress on an escape, but then they get caught by a weak guard, who lets them go because he knows he can't defeat them. Back to Mob. Him, Dimple, and Taruki split up, each facing their own challenges, Taruki being the first one to be captured. Mob begins fighting Mukai, who is using puppets to try and defeat him, and Dimple's facing off against an upper echelon member, Matsuo. Mob is tricked using an illusion and releases 100% emotion, taking out his enemy, but also passing out in the process. Now, Mob, Dimple, and Taruki are all captured. Ending this episode off, we see Reigen entering the building. Reigen walks around like he owns the place, and says he's there for his subordinate, leading the guards to think he's the boss of Claw. They let him all the way to the room where the kids are being held, and he demands they be released. Just then, the upper echelon arrive, hearing of the boss being there, and attack Reigen. Taruki makes a barrier blocking for him. At this moment, Reigen sees Mob about to use his power on them, and drop kicks him, reminding him not to use it to fight, and then takes them all on alone. After punching Meraki, it infuriates him into destroying part of the facility with his power. Mob is torn, with Reigen saying don't use your power, while Ritsu and Taruki say he's the only one that can win. The final straw is seeing his friends hurt and his murderous intent reaches 100%. But just then, Reigen slaps him, bringing him back and telling him that he'll regret it later on. Mob begins to think back on fond memories with Reigen, and when his daydream's over, he sees Reigen cut down right in front of him. Mob transfers all of his abilities to Reigen, leaving only gratitude in his heart for his teacher. We then see Reigen standing up, wondering if the sword that hit him was plastic because he felt no damage. Shrugging off all of the attacks with his now 1000% thanks to Mob, he begins fighting the entirety of the Claw 7th Division by himself, instantly destroying all of their abilities and smacking them around with ease. After the battle's over, Taruki takes the kid espers and begins a sort of group with them, claiming he will help them become strong. One of the members of the 7th Division calls his father, the leader of Claw, and tells him that he must return to Japan and that they are no longer the strongest organization. Later, Reigen and Mob head into the forest to exterminate a spirit, but Reigen finds mushrooms and decides to collect them for food. A large monster then appears, and Mob defeats it, and as it dies, it spits out many mushrooms. Reigen decides to leave happy with all the mushrooms, stating that the spirit probably doesn't even exist, but little did he know that the monster that spit out the mushrooms was the exact spirit they were hunting. The second season starts off with Mob and Reigen visiting a farm to exorcise the spirit. The spirit takes control of the roots, capturing Reigen, and forcing Mob to stop his attack. Mob then uses a higher command to take control of the roots, and shortly thereafter defeats the monster. Later at school, Mob is convinced to run for president to help look better for his crush. But unfortunately, he freezes up on his speech and loses the election. Later, Mob receives a love letter in his locker from Emmy, confessing that she likes him. Mob has no interest in the girl, but still hangs out with her, and then eventually she confesses that she lost a bet and had to ask him out, but didn't want to hurt his feelings anymore and decided to just come clean. She then goes back to her friends, who bully her and rip her book she was writing to pieces. Mob steps in and reassembles the pieces using his abilities, and tells Emmy he's an Esper. Mob then confesses his story to Dimple, and we are shown Emmy growing real feelings towards Mob and begins writing a story about him. We see Reigen struggling to find work, so he takes Mob to go look around a place an urban legend originated, thinking even if it's not real, people will be willing to pay there. They meet with Bonshomaru, another Esper, and decide to take on the urban legend together. They eventually meet the spirit Kuchisake Onna and realize she is created from human fear, and since she is a long-standing urban legend, is extremely powerful. But Mob has no idea of this urban legend, so he harbors no fear towards her, and defeats her easily. After leaving, Reigen sees an old woman ghost and orders Mob to exorcise her, but nothing happens. They fear she's an extremely powerful ghost and run away, only to be passed by the same woman, realizing she's no ghost, and also realizing that somehow the old lady is faster than them. Next, we see Reigen receive an order to place a curse on someone. He's initially reluctant, but eventually agrees. The man states that he's grateful, but if it's fake, then he will curse Reigen in return, and Mob begins to worry for him. But just then, they receive a call from another client being harassed by a spirit. They eventually find out it's a person, not a spirit, and he begs for forgiveness for being stalkerish, to which the lady rejects him and hands him over to the police. The next day, Mob's getting bullied at school. Ritsu and Dimple try to help by possessing the bullies, but Mob tells them to stop. Shortly after, the Body Improvement Club comes to help as well. A little later on, students come to Reigen with a job to exorcise spirits. Upon his and Mob's arrival, they realize they aren't even evil spirits at all, and Mob doesn't want to exorcise them. But when the clients get angry, Reigen steps in and performs a fake exorcism, saving Mob from the situation. Dimple then notices a curse on Reigen and eats it for him to get rid of it. A rich man hires Mob and Reigen to perform an exorcism on the spirit taking control of his daughter. When they get there, she seems normal at first, but then Mob is able to draw the spirit out, who Dimple recognizes as a former psychic, Keiji Mogami, and warns them not to get involved. Mob decides to try and exorcise it anyway, but soon realizes the spirit is rooted too deep. Mob then leaves his body to chase the spirit out. Once Mob leaves his body, Mogami attempts to possess him, but Dimple is already there. We then go back to the girl's body. Mogami explains to Mob that they're in a mental world and he can bend it to his will. Mob can't damage him at all, no matter what he does. Mogami then crafts the mental world into a copy of Mob's life, except he has no powers or friends, leaving him to suffer. In this world, Mogami takes the form of the rich man's daughter and leads the imaginary middle schoolers to relentlessly bully Mob. Only 30 minutes in the real world have passed, but Mob has gone through 6 months in the mental world, and he's about to break. Just as he planned, Mogami sends more bullies and gives Mob his powers back in hope of forcing Mob to kill them, and he's about to. But Dimple comes in and gives Mob back his memories. Mogami then reveals that the people are all spirits that he's absorbed, and they begin to attack Mob. Mob unleashes the power of courage and destroys the spirits. Upon his defeat, Mogami releases all of the spirits he's accumulated, who then begin to destroy Mob's body. But Mob breaches question mark percentage and vaporizes the entire mental world. Mob wakes up in his own body. The rich man's daughter, Minori, wakes up as well. Having seen what happened, she apologizes to Mob, admitting that's actually what she was like in real life. Mob then accepts her apology and says he feels better now that it's proven that people can change. We then see Mob emotionally torn between his friends and his work as a disciple of Reigen. He finally realizes that Reigen has just been using him for his psychic powers. As Mob and Reigen go their separate ways, Reigen also realizes, after a night at the bar, that he has no friends and that his life is a little miserable. Even though Mob left him, he reminds himself that he started this business and it can go on without Mob's help. As he is by himself, he starts to change. He begins to film the process of exercising and uploads it to the net, giving free courses to prevent people from getting tricked by frauds and giving people advice about their life. Reigen's reputation increases as he soon becomes known as Seasoning City's bro. A few days later, Reigen is interviewed by magazines and even offered to be on a television show. He gladly accepts it as it can make him even more famous. However, the show is actually a setup by Kirin Jodo to exploit Reigen as a fraud due to Jodo having a grudge after discovering that Reigen kneed him in the face while possessed by Keiji Mogami. Reigen was humiliated during the press conference, being exposed as a fraud. Rumors about him start, and his previous clients begin to form a group of his victims. Mob hears about it, but believes it must be all his teacher's plan to get even more famous. Reigen then plans a press conference to confront the issues at hand, but during the conference, things go awry, and Reigen then challenges them all, saying they have no proof he's actually not psychic. Eventually, he's asked why he became a psychic. He thinks back on Mob and how he regrets that he used him, and simply answers, "You have grown up," referring to Mob. Immediately after, all the cameras begin to levitate, and the media is freaked out, and then again believe Reigen to be a psychic. After the conference, he meets up with Mob and Dimple, asking them why they came and if they knew his true identity. Mob replies he doesn't know why he came, and states that he knew Reigen's true identity the whole time, that of a good person. We see Mob expressing his desire to participate in the marathon to impress his crush Tsubomi. He tells his friends last year he was 291st out of 300, but knows he can improve this year. During the race, he actually made it up to 74th place before passing out. Upon waking up, he is sad that he didn't finish, but nonetheless feels accomplished and decides to head home. At the same time, Sho Suzuki, one of Claw's espers, made his way into Mob's house, and by the time Mob arrives, there is only ashes and burned remains. Due to the negative emotions he feels, we see Mob hit %% again before the episode ends. On the verge of exploding emotionally, Dimple calms Mob down and reveals that the bodies were fake. Mob then starts looking for espers to find clues about his family's whereabouts. Soon, he finds 2 members of Claw's main branch looking for him, but none of them know about his family. Shortly thereafter, Mob meets up with the rest of the gang, including the kids from the Awakening Lab, most of the former 7th Division's members, and Reigen. It turns out that Claw was going for an all-out attack against the city, whilst getting rid of all obstacles that might pose a threat. Mob, then feeling safe with Reigen, passes out from emotional exhaustion. Meanwhile, Sho and Ritsu plan their move to take down Claw's boss, Toichiro Suzuki, who turns out to be Sho's father. We then see Toichiro order the capture of the Prime Minister. Teru attempts to save him, but is no match for Toichiro's subordinates and ends up being defeated. While the gang is on their way to infiltrate the tower Claw had taken over, Toichiro sends some of his subordinates to find and eliminate Mob, who is still sleeping. Reigen, still protecting Mob, takes out the lackey espers, but enrages the group leader, Shibata, to a level where he only cares about crushing them. Dimple then takes control of Mob's body to try and escape, but is forced to make a move when Shibata targets a group of innocents. This knocks Mob into the Body Improvement Club, who are taken down easily by Shibata, leading Mob to awaken and finally deal with Shibata for good. Mob, on his way to the tower, is forced to fight an Esper group of Claw, until Minagishi of the Ultimate Five arrives to stop him. Matsuo comes to Mob's aid, but loses the flask he used to seal Mogami to the Esper group. Despite his warning, the Espers shatter the flask, releasing a very angry and seemingly unstoppable Mogami. When Mogami is about to crush Minagishi, Mob pleads for Mogami to let him live, because of how Minagishi can still become a better person. Mogami leaves, giving Mob the advice to be more strict towards others, as this would make him more unbeatable. The rest of the gang gets intercepted and are quickly defeated by Shimazaki. Shimazaki, who then intercepts Sho and Ritsu, lets Sho pass, only to focus on Ritsu. But before he can deal the finishing blow, the entire group shows up to assist Ritsu. Despite their best efforts, it seems impossible to defeat Shimazaki. However, with Teru's prompting, the group takes the advantage until Shimazaki goes all out and quickly takes them all down. In his heightened state, Shimazaki notices Mob's presence and gets ready to confront him, only to be defeated by Reigen. At the same time, Sho effortlessly takes down Hattori and finally confronts his father, Toichiro. The fight does not go as Sho has planned when he finds out how his father's power works and Sho is soundly defeated. Before defeating Sho, Toichiro reveals that when he was young, Toichiro's immense Esper power made him superior to everyone else. Toichiro explains that he plans to take over the world, and reveals his ability to store and transfer psychic energy between beings, and demonstrates by taking back the energy he gave to the now defeated Claw soldiers strewn about the area. Mob frees the Prime Minister and meets with Serizawa, the last and most powerful of the Ultimate Five. It turns out Serizawa was a social shut-in because of his powers, but Toichiro Suzuki offered him a job and a way to control his power. Serizawa firmly believes in his boss's ideology, but Mob convinces him through his own emotions that Mob is just like him, and Mob can be his friend. He eventually confronts Toichiro and sees the kind of person he is, beginning the battle between the boss of Claw and the powerful middle schooler. Mob, despite his best efforts, is unable to convince Toichiro, who is completely power-obsessed and delusional. Before Toichiro can kill Mob, Reigen arrives and tries to punch Toichiro, but Toichiro dodges and prepares to blow up Reigen, who is barely saved by Serizawa. Mob reaches 100% emotional state, and during the chaos, Reigen, Serizawa, and Sho land on the ground with Ritsu and the rest of Claw. Toichiro berates Mob as a weakling, but Mob states that now that his friends and allies are away, Mob can finally go all out in his rage. Through a gradual shift of different 100% emotions, Mob forces Toichiro to go 100% with his own power, which in turn makes him lose control over it, causing him to turn into a living bomb capable of wiping out the whole city. Mob, showing his kindness to Toichiro, redirects the power into his body, leading to a seemingly smaller explosion that keeps the city safe. In the aftermath, Toichiro admits his mistake and allows himself to be taken into custody, after apologizing to Sho. On television, it is shown that the apparent huge explosion actually caused the sudden growth of the broccoli seed that Mob kept in his shirt pocket, forming the Divine Tree. We end off Season 2 with a scene showing that Serizawa actually came to work for Reigen. He feels bad about all the trouble he's caused while being manipulated by Toichiro, and wants to do good with his life moving forward. Although still super meek and antisocial, we get to add another member to this crew for seasons to come. Hey guys, I saw that a lot of you liked my last recap video for Classroom with the Elite, so I thought I would do another one. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below and recommendations for other recap videos. And as always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more content. Thanks to everyone for watching, and I'll see you next time.